want to welcome everyone to this very special broadcast of the Intelligence Assessment with Kevin Shipp. And I'm a little bit sorry to announce that we've had a last minute, Kevin's having a bit of a technical emergency over at his place. So unfortunately, Lee, we will not be joined. This is going to be the Intelligence Assessment without Kevin Shipp. And I apologize to you for that, because I know that you and he had a lot to discuss on this topic. First of all, how are you tonight, Lee?
I'm doing great. And it's, I guess with me here, it is the unintelligence assessment, because
not at all.
I can't compete with Kevin.
Well,
but,
it's going to be a wonderful presentation irrespective of Kevin's presence, and he'll be back with us next week. There's a lot to follow up with on this topic. First, let me say, you're looking very well. You look like you've lost some weight. I know you've had some health concerns lately, so I'm glad to see you moving in the right direction. You look as fit as you ever have.
Yeah, I would say so. I'll tell you, the key is meat. I've been on the ketogenic diet, and it really it works, and B, it's delicious. So it's got that going for it too. So that's a bit helping. But it's yeah, thanks. Nice of you to say, Jason.
Yeah. So the thing that we want to talk about today, Lee, and the reason why I asked you to join us is because there's no one that I'm aware of that's done more investigation or has brought forward more evidence-based info with regard to this whole Bill Browder situation, first in the Soviet Union, then in Russia. People are going to remember that you were in Helsinki during the presidential summit when Putin called out Browder. Now we've got a surprise announcement last night from Republican Congressman Devin Nunes, who has become a real proponent of lawsuits. He's announced a new lawsuit. This one is against Fusion GPS and Glenn Simpson, which seems like a good thing. But then during his appearance on Sean Hannity on Fox News last night, Devin Nunes said that Fusion GPS has smeared Bill Browder, and he seemed to be defending Browder. What do you think about that, Lee?
Well, first off, I want to make sure I give credit to three people who I think have done more than I have. I'm lucky because I host a radio show. And it's a 3-hour radio show called Fault Lines with Nixon and Stranahan on Radio Sputnik, and we're on 105.5 FM AM 1390 in Washington. But the reason I mention that is because we've had three people on the show pretty regularly. Alex Craner, who wrote the book Grand Deception, he wrote a whole book about Bill Browder. Mm-hmm. Andrei Nekrasov, who directed a film called The Magnitsky Act Behind the Scenes. And then a really great investigative reporter named Lucy Commissar with a K. She's been investigating Bill Browder for about 20 years.
Wow.
And that's because Lucy focuses on money laundering and the use of offshore bank accounts. That's what she's a financial investigative reporter. And she does a fantastic job on this stuff. So one of the things I've been able to do, where I will take some credit, is that we have really kept the heat on Bill Browder by having guests on constantly and talking about it. And then I've been talking about it. And because my audience, because I was the lead investigative reporter at Breitbart News, I've been able to hit an audience about Bill Browder. And because Bill Browder is central to a lot of stuff, I've been able to hit on it consistently. Now, I got to point out, Fox News has been as bad about Bill Browder. Before we talk about who he is, Fox News has been as bad on Browder as you could possibly be. In fact, and by the way, this is interesting because Browder is a guy who no Trump supporter should like.
Right.
There is nothing about Bill Browder that anyone, and by the way, he's somebody who no honest Democrat should like either.
No honest person should like.
Yeah, no, right. I agree. But he's an anti-Trumper. Let's just be 100% clear. He's an anti-Trumper. You can look at his appearances. Now, what he is, though, is he's smart. So when he goes on Fox, which he goes on a lot, you mentioned Helsinki, where Vladimir Putin mentioned Bill Browder. Mm-hmm. And don't forget what that was in the context of. when Trump was on his way to Helsinki, Robert Mueller dropped that very politically motivated indictment against 12 Russians.
Right.
They had no facts or proof for it. None. There is no proof at all that any, and if it comes out and I see it, I'll say, yep, there's the proof. But there isn't any that's come out so far. There's no proof in that indictment. And he did it politically to try to destroy and disrupt Trump's meeting with Putin, because they're scared to death about Trump and Putin talking. And Bill Browder was on Fox News 8 times that week, 8 appearances.
Wow.
And let me just mention, we talked about who is Bill Browder. Bill Browder is an American-born hedge fund manager, investment guy, convicted tax fraudster. Now, let's why I say no American should like him. Let's talk about his background. So first off, interestingly, his grandfather, Earl Browder, was the head of the U.S. Communist Party. Ooh. And I don't hold that against Browder, but it's interesting because his father, Felix Browder, who's a very well-known mathematician, was born in Russia. Bill Browder's grandfather, Earl Browder, was not only the head of the U.S. Communist Party, but he also was a spy for Stalin. And this is known and established that he and his grandmother, who Raisa Browder, was Russian, met Bill Browder over there. Now, Bill Browder lies about his own grandfather. If you watch Bill Browder's appearances on places like the TED Talk that he did, you can find that on YouTube.
Right.
Here's Bill Browder's story. Well, I come from a very interesting American family. My grandfather was head of the U.S. Communist Party. And the way he became that is he was a union organizer. And he got so good at being a union organizer that the Russians said, hey, if you like union organizing, you'll love communism. That is a lie. That's a lie. Now, and anybody can look up Earl Browder's history. Earl Browder, and it's actually insulting to Earl Browder. Earl Browder was a socialist when he was 16. His father and his brother were socialists. This was, they're from Kansas. This is in Kansas or possibly Nebraska. I think it's Kansas, but one of those 2 states. And I'm not looking at my notes right now, but I know it's Kansas or Nebraska. And they were socialists before there was a U.S. Communist Party. And he was part of forming the U.S. Communist Party. And Bill Browder Earl Browder during World War I served time in prison as a war objector. So again, this is a guy who, I don't like communism, but that's the reality. Then he went to Russia. So well after he was a socialist, after he was in prison, then he went to Russia. Then he became a Stalinist. Then he became a spy for Stalin. And this is all out there right now. And he was, at one time, Earl Browder was like the best known communist. And don't forget, this is in a period when the communists actually were being taken seriously as a political party. Earl Browder also, by the way, was the first. He had a black running mate when he ran for president against FDR. So imagine that, right? So again, I'm not in favor of communism, but that's who this guy is. Okay, so Wichita, Kansas. I was right the first time. Yeah, thanks, Jason. So Bill Browder lies about his own grandfather, and that's because Bill Browder is not a U.S. citizen. He renounced his U.S. citizenship. Right. Now, let me just stop right there. They never mentioned this on Fox. So if you were on Fox News, if you're a Fox News viewer and you heard, hey, we got Bill Browder coming on the show, and his grandfather was the head of the Communist Party, and he renounced his U.S. citizenship. What would your, I mean, just the average Fox viewer right there.
You might switch on MSNBC and see who Rachel Maddow has as a guest that day.
And by the way, they would probably have Bill Browder because he's on every network. He's on every network. Now, why did he renounce his U.S. citizenship?
Yeah.
Actually, you can find out a lot about Bill Browder by watching something that I posted on YouTube. Just look for Bill Browder deposition.
Oh, yeah.
And I posted all 6 hours of a 2015 video deposition that directly he admits that he renounced his U.S. citizenship. Now, he says he did it because he didn't like the way the country was treating his communist family, which, again, would not be a big selling point with the average Fox viewer. But I don't even think that's what's really happening, because you can also find a CBS News article. He renounced his U.S. citizenship to avoid paying taxes.
Wow.
He became a British citizen because at the time he was making money after the fall of the Soviet Union, and he didn't want to pay taxes on it. And at the time in the UK, you didn't have to pay taxes. So that what you're showing right now is the entire deposition, unedited, uncut. It's in 6 parts, and you can also find a written transcript of it if you want to find it. But the reason I put this out there, and the other thing that people might want to look at here, is another deposition from the lead investigative reporter who covered the Browder story for the Department of Homeland Security. His name's Todd. I posted that as well. He admits that the only information that they got on this case came from Bill Browder. Now, just think about that for a second. How does that make any sense whatsoever? A guy named Todd Hyman. If you go Todd Hyman deposition, you'll find it. And again, if people watch it, you'll do this. Now, the reason they like Browder is because he was used as the spokesman for something called the Magnitsky Act.
Right.
And yeah, there's the Todd Hyman stuff. And again, I posted the entire thing.
And we should also note, Lee, people can subscribe to Populist.tv's YouTube channel by searching for Populist.tv. You can also visit thepopulist.us. And Lee has many websites. People who are watching right now and maybe aren't familiar with Lee can also go over to citizenjournalismschool.com, and you can sign up. You can join and take the online courses, learn all about citizen journalism from Lee, who's been decades-long, dogged investigator, cut his teeth with Andrew Breitbart. Sorry to interrupt, Lee. Please carry on.
No, it was a very well done plug, Jason. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
By the way, people should also subscribe to Crowdsource the Truth, but you know that already.
Right.
So I posted all this material because this is the biggest con job in the world. It's one of the biggest con jobs. And when I say in the world, I mean Bill Browder goes around the world selling this Magnitsky Act. Now, what is the Magnitsky Act? Let's just talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
The Magnitsky Act says that anybody who's put on a list of people that's agreed to by the Treasury Department and the State Department can have their bank accounts in the U.S. frozen, and they can't travel to the U.S. Now, I'm going to say that again. There's a list of people that's agreed to by the Treasury Department and the Secretary of State that allows us to freeze bank accounts and stop travel. Now, you may say, okay, but there's a process, right? Like,
yeah,
the people they've been found guilty by some international tribunal or something. Nope, nothing. It is literally just a list of people. And so just stop right there. Just hold everything. That is a crazy unconstitutional law.
Yeah.
It makes no sense whatsoever. And literally, there is no standard whatsoever. But the thing you'll find if you look up the Magnitsky Act, and you can find the full text of it on there, there's two things you want to look for. Yukos oil, Y-U-K-O-S, oil, which is written right into the Magnitsky Act, and a guy named Mikhail Khodorkovsky.
Right.
Now, Mikhail Khodorkovsky is central to this whole thing. But Mikhail Khodorkovsky, who is a Russian oligarch, old school Russian oligarch, right after the fall of the Soviet Union. Khodorkovsky's a guy who became a billionaire. He was a banker. By a banker, but he was a criminal. And he was an oligarch in the post fall of the Soviet Union 1990s Russia thing. Now, this is the 1990s. This is the Russia that Boris Yeltsin, this is pre-Putin. It's important to understand that. And nobody in the U.S. in fact, I didn't know about it before I started looking into the Browder story. Mikhail Khodorkovsky is
that's him, right?
That's Mikhail, yeah. And he did the George Soros thing, which is you're a hedge fund manager like Soros, a currency manipulator, right? Khodorkovsky is all explained and said just as bad. So how do you get credibility if you're that kind of guy, right? You broke the Bank of England. You call yourself a human rights activist.
Right.
You see? And then you start writing checks to people. The ACLU and the NAACP and every single, like Soros did, every single left-wing organization. You write checks to the Atlantic Council. Lo and behold, they all love you, right? You're now a human rights hero. And if that's the Magnitsky Act, if that's it right there, just do a search. You'll find it, Jason, very easily. Yukos.
There it is.
Because this is supposedly a human rights thing. Okay, so why? Well, I'm going to read what it says here. This is a law. No one ever talks about this part, but you see it's right in the law. Advocating for the U.S. investors in the Russian Federation, including by promoting the claims of U.S. investors in Yukos oil. Now, that doesn't sound very human rightsy, does it?
It doesn't even sound like something that should be a law. It sounds like something that's promoting investment in this company.
Yeah, and I'll talk about who Yukos is in a second, because this is where it gets to Khodorkovsky. And if you look up Khodorkovsky, which is Khodork, Khodork, Ovsky, you'll find that once again, Khodorkovsky is mentioned over and over again right in the Magnitsky Act. And the reason why is he's the guy who's lobbying money paid for it. Now, you notice there it is. Second trial verdict against... Right. Now, he's right in the law. Now, who is Mikhail Khodorkovsky? What is Yukos? Yukos is an oil company that was one of the big oil companies in Russia. Here's how it happened. After the fall, so think about this. Communism falls, okay? And now you've got all these assets that were once owned by the state. And now you're switching to a more capitalist system. Does that make sense? So this is the problem that they had in Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union. So how do you distribute that in a way that's trying to be fair to the people? Because it was owned by the people under communism, theoretically, right? All the state assets, the oil companies, the media companies, everything. So now you want to switch to something private. So they came up with a system, and it was a guy named Chubais, but it was also people from University of Chicago and Harvard. In particular, Harvard, Larry Summers, who's connected to Jeffrey Epstein, which is the other story I'm working on now. Larry Summers is the guy behind this. In fact, it's a great article called The Harvard Boys Do Russia that talks about how under the Clinton administration, Larry Summers and the Harvard people, they were privatizing things. And they did it really in like one of the worst ways possible, actually, which is they issued these vouchers, okay? They issued these vouchers. And they said, okay, everybody in Russia is going to get a certain number of these vouchers that they can use to buy stock in different companies. Sounds good in theory, but in practice, the way it worked is people were starving. So what happened was people were selling their certificates for like $5 for nothing, for a bottle of vodka, right? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it'd be like right after you freed the slaves, you said, okay, you slaves in the U.S., you've been treated badly. We're going to give you Confederate fun bucks, right?
Yeah.
And then you've got people who have been uneducated because they were slaves, right? And then somebody comes along and goes, hey, those fun bucks that you can use to buy, we'll give you $1 for them.
Yeah.
And if you don't know anything, you go...
something they need immediately. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, by the way, this is how Bill Browder made his money. And he talks about in his book, Red Notice. This is how he made his money, by ripping off the Russian people. So meanwhile, things are going awfully for people in Russia. But guys like Khodorkovsky are getting rich. And where Khodorkovsky started to make his money was he bought a bank. He bought a bank called Bank Menatip, which is Menatip. Bank Menatip. Now, let's talk about that for a second. One of the ways you can find out what's going on with him is if you go to opensecrets.org, which is the public information website about lobbying money and all that stuff, and you just type in Menatip, you'll find that Mikhail Khodorkovsky, since the end of the 90s, has been investing millions in lobbying. Now, he's a Russian oligarch, criminal, bad guy, but nobody talks about him, but you'll find it very easily. The other thing you'll find, aside from Menatip, is Corbiere, Corbiere. Corbiere was his other company, he's got two lobbying groups. And this is where it all starts to tie in very, very clearly to the fake Russia narrative that we have. If you look up Corbiere, and if you go to the year 2011,
sorry, how do you spell it, Lee? C-O-R?
Corbie. I think you're finding it. Corbiere Trust. I think you're finding it. You're seeing it right there.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, we had it.
Corbiere.
There we go. Okay. Sometimes tricky to find this stuff.
Yeah. No, it is. But once you know what you're looking for, so yep, if you go there, and you go to 2011,
ooh,
and you notice they had a spike there. 2010. Go to 2010. That'll be fine.
Yeah. Wow.
You see, that's where they spent a lot of money. They spent nearly $1 million that year. Okay. So if you go to who they spent it on, let's look down there. They spent it. Who got their money? APCO Worldwide.
Yeah.
Now we'll talk about APCO in just 1 second. But now look at if you go up and scroll up for a second, and go to bills. If you go to bills, and this is all public record information. Okay, now go to 2011 because they spent a lot of money in 2010, but where it started to show up was in 2011, where the bill is. Oh, look.
So they basically financed this act and getting it made into a law.
That's right. And that's why Khodorkovsky's name and Yukos Oil are in it. Because Khodorkovsky bought Yukos Oil. And here's how he did it. They were auctioning it off. They were auctioning off Yukos Oil. Mm-hmm. So what he did was he bought the Bank Menatip, that was doing the auction, right?
Yeah.
So I'll put it like this. Let's say Christie's auction house, which everybody's heard of, is about to sell a painting that's worth $100 million. But you find out you can buy Christie's for $1 million, right?
Right.
So
and rig the auctions.
That's exactly right, and that's exactly what he did. This is exactly what he did. He bought the Bank Menatip, which is why it's so ballsy that one of his lobbying companies is called Menatip. Then he bought Yukos. He threw all the other guys out and took over Yukos. And Bill Browder, but here's the problem. Bill Browder had an issue because Americans were only allowed to buy so much. Non-Russians, they were worried that people were trying to steal the Russian oil assets. Now, let's talk about Khodorkovsky again. Since you're looking stuff up, try to do an image search for Khodorkovsky George W. Bush. And what you'll find is a picture of this guy, Mikhail Khodorkovsky, signed by George W. Bush. Why is that? Because Khodorkovsky was on the board of the Carlyle Group.
Oh, boy.
You've heard of the Carlyle Group, of course. There you go. Right? So there it is, right there. There's Khodorkovsky with best wishes from Bush. He was on the, and again, this is how these elitists roll. So at the same time George H.W. Bush is with the Carlyle Group, Khodorkovsky is with there.
Now, is this Bill Browder standing right next to him? Who is that?
No, that's Khodorkovsky.
Oh, okay. And who's this?
It. That's I don't know who that is. That could be, I don't know who that is.
Okay, interesting. So Khodorkovsky is down with George W.
And with the Clintons.
Wow.
And with the Clintons.
Yes.
Because he started something called Open Russia, which he named after open societies. And you'll also see he's close to Soros. He is right in this network where they don't care who they buy off Republicans, they buy off Democrats, they buy off everybody. And you can see what's happening here, right? And by the way, nothing I'm showing you, is there anything that seems like remotely tricky or conjecture-y or
no?
You're seeing
the signature of the president, articles in Reuters. You know, it's like this is statements from Putin. Yeah,
that's right. Because here's what happened: when Putin came in, Putin was put into place by Russian oligarchs who thought he would be another puppet. Right. They liked Yeltsin because he was a puppet. They liked the guy they put in, Medvedev. I can't even pronounce. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
He was a puppet. They thought Putin would be another puppet. But Putin was not a puppet. He was a nationalist who realized how bad things were in Russia. And he took over. So what he did was, in the late 90s, when Putin took over, early 2000s, he said to the oligarchs, look, what you've got, you've got. I'm not going to try to prosecute you or anything like that, but you stop buying the government. And Khodorkovsky didn't. He went to buy the Duma, the Russian Congress.
Ooh.
And because he's an oligarch, and he thought he was safe because he was friends with the Bushes and friends with the Clintons. You'll find Khodorkovsky everywhere. And then Putin had him arrested and put in jail. He later pardoned him. And after he pardoned him, he screwed his own partner and started to go on a revenge thing against Putin. So this is what Khodorkovsky is. Now, let's talk about APCO, because you saw that APCO was one of the big lobbying companies, right?
Yeah.
APCO, worldwide, the main lobbyist and the architect of the Magnitsky Act is a guy who you've heard of, Jason, and some people are starting to hear about, Jonathan Weiner.
Right.
Jonathan Weiner is at the center of the whole Trump-Russia scandal. He is the guy who brought Christopher Steele into this. You follow me?
Yes.
Literally. And you're seeing that now. There've been, you're starting to see limited hangout reporting by people like John Solomon. By the way, some people, one of the raps against me is that I attack my own side. And that's because I've said that everything I'm showing you, there's nothing debatable about this, right? And so if the U.S. is worried about Russians and about Russians buying political influence, I've got a Russian for you. It's Khodorkovsky, right?
Yes.
And he literally gave $1 million to the Library of Congress. There's Jonathan Weiner. He is the guy behind this. Jonathan Weiner is the one who brought Christopher Steele into this whole thing and was being updated by Steele. He brought him in, the whole Trump-Russia thing. And by the way, Jonathan Weiner is, if you look at his LinkedIn resume, there's an article he quotes where he calls himself the fixer. So he's the guy, he's Bill Browder's attorney. I'll say that again. Jonathan Weiner is Bill Browder's attorney. Remember I mentioned at the beginning, Alex Craner has a book called Grand Deception?
Yeah.
You can't find it on Amazon. It was pulled off of Amazon because Jonathan Weiner wrote a letter to Amazon. We have the letter. Jonathan Weiner personally, and by the way, he was a longtime aide to, who's Jonathan Weiner? Longtime aide to John Kerry, was in the Clinton State Department, was in the Obama State Department, was doing this stuff while he was at the Obama State Department, where he was the special envoy, okay?
And
also
to Libya.
A Yale guy. What's that?
Special envoy to Libya, which they destroyed.
That's right. He's right. He's a cleanup guy.
I mean,
That's
these guys
what he
are
is.
huge international criminals.
And what you're seeing right there is this is his own LinkedIn page. Notice that article that he quotes about himself, just right there. He calls himself the fixer-in-chief. So he's the guy who put together the Magnitsky Act, in part just to protect Yukos oil, but also to protect HSBC.
Ooh.
Why HSBC?
Because it's the new BCCI.
And because they owned Bill Browder's company. Okay? Bill Browder had a company called Hermitage. The first partner he had was Edmund Safra, a notorious money launderer who was laundering money for the mob through Russia, through Republic Bank of New York. There's a big article called The Money Plane. I reprinted it on The Populist. You can read all about that. But after Safra mysteriously was murdered, HSBC bought it. And this is why people like Lucy Commissar have gotten involved. HSBC, of course, is a British bank that was started to fund the opium trade in the 1800s, right? And that's where they started. They are a lot of this is about money laundering. If you go down a little bit, I think it's right below that, Jason. I've got this article called The Money Plane that I reprinted, basically. It was originally a New Yorker article, and I reprinted it because it's hard to find. This is a phenomenal article written by a guy named Friedman. Very good piece of investigative journalism that goes into detail, and it quotes Jonathan Weiner, who at the time was in charge of stopping money laundering in Russia. So, and it mentions Khodorkovsky. It mentions all this stuff. This is a 2000 article about how, get this, Jason, out of JFK, up to $1 billion a day in freshly minted bills.
JFK Airport.
JFK Airport, right. Straight, we're flying to Russia. It was a plane with sometimes, Jason, $1 billion in cold, hard cash that came straight from the Federal Reserve.
Wow.
Right? And again, this is not, this is, Robert Friedman has passed away. He's been gone. This article, you can't really find it. It's not like archived anywhere. Wow. So I took the liberty of reprinting it in full because I want people to be able to read it. Yeah, this article is staggering, and it mentions Weiner, it mentioned Khodorkovsky, and it talks about the money laundering. This is what's going on. Jonathan Weiner is protecting the international money laundering ring. And let's tie it back into Jeff Epstein again, shall we?
Yeah.
Okay, I already mentioned Larry Summers. Larry Summers is a friend of Jeff Epstein. Anybody can look that up.
And he's the president of Harvard.
That's right. And he was introduced to Epstein through Alan Dershowitz, his attorney and friend. That's who introduced the two of them. Jeffrey Epstein gave, I want to say, $30 million to Harvard. Okay? Now, we also know about Bill Richardson's connection to Jeffrey Epstein. He's named by Virginia.
He was the governor of New Mexico.
That's right. Guess where Bill Richardson works now? Here's a hint. It's a lobbying firm.
APCO?
APCO. That's right. Bill Richardson works at APCO. Again, APCO's not big. By the way, the co-founder of APCO is as tightly connected to Khodorkovsky. She's on the board of the Open Russia Foundation or one of those things. There you go. See, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable, Lee. And, the thing is, so it's a very complicated story. You're doing a great job of breaking it down and drawing these connections for everybody. It's interesting that, it comes back to Epstein, and Epstein allegedly just died in prison. The thing I want to bring you back to, however, is what do we think this all means in the context of Devin Nunes' new lawsuit and the statements that he made last night on Fox News, where he seems to be defending Bill Browder?
Well, let's talk about that. If you look up the board of a company called Genie Energy,
right?
Genie Energy holds the exclusive drilling rights to the oil under the Golan Heights. And their advisory board has 4 people that are also connected to Epstein. Here's who's on the advisory board. Let me name the 4 people who aren't connected to Epstein that I found.
It might be easier.
Maybe I'm missing them.
Yeah.
Half of the advisory board's connected to him. The 4 people that aren't: Dick Cheney, former VP; James Woolsey, former head of the CIA;
oh boy;
Mary Landrieu, senator from New Mexico, from Louisiana, forgive me; Who am I forgetting? I'm forgetting one person. But let's go over who's on the advisory board. This is the main board, by the way. The board. They took down their advisory board page. You have to look it up. You're not going to. Once I started reporting on Genie Energy. Now let's talk about the 4 people who are directly connected to Epstein. One of them is Jacob Rothschild, who's connected. Oh, you know what? No, in fact, I only count Rothschild as half. His brother is married to Linda Forrester Rothschild, who is the person who introduced Epstein to Dershowitz. So forgive me,
and has
Jacob
been
Rothschild
photographed
is only
with James Alefantis and David Brock.
That's right. Yes. Now, the other place. Let's talk about the 4 that are directly connected. One of them is a guy named Michael Steinhardt. People don't know who Steinhardt is, but he was part of the mega group of donors with Leslie Wexner.
Yes.
I won't go down that rabbit hole, but it's not even a rabbit hole. It's just factual, right?
Right.
Okay. Next, Bill Richardson is on the board of Genie Energy. Okay. Larry Summers is on the board of Genie Energy. And finally, Rupert Murdoch. So,
owner of the New York Post, Lee.
Of the New York
and
Post
Fox
and
News.
Of course, and Fox News. So you want to ask yourself, like, why is Fox News so in the tank for Bill Browder? And that's because there's a small group of elites who are connected. And this is where I started to get interested in the Epstein story. And you've talked about stuff like Ghislaine Maxwell and the photo and stuff like that. If you look up, you'll find a photo of Ghislaine Maxwell with Rupert Murdoch, an event that Rupert Murdoch's family, his wife, Wendy Diang, who's a suspected Chinese agent. Now, by the way, you're showing the other page here. Let's talk about the other big Genie Energy connection. Howard Jonas, Genie Energy is a spin-off company from a company called IDT, which sold phone cards. Jonas is the CEO. If you scroll down a little, I think you'll find Ira Greenstein.
IDT Corporation, yeah. Well, there's an awful lot of Jewish names on this board, and a lot of people are going to say that this is a Mossad company that's trying to plunder Syria to mine the oil in the Golan Heights, and it's hard to argue with that.
It is impossible to argue with it, and not only that, but Genie, this is a Netanyahu said, why does an American company have exclusive drilling rights, right? And it's
in
just
a country that America was bombing,
right,
and lying about.
And by the way, Steinhardt, who I mentioned, a very interesting guy, part of the mega group of donors. He's an atheist, you know. I mean, Steinhardt's interesting. His father was a jewel fence named Red McGee, who worked for Meyer Lansky. He was one of Lansky's criminals. That's, again, on public record. And that's where he got the initial money to do his stuff. He's also been accused of sexually assaulting women who were involved with Israeli philanthropies. So another great guy. But what I want to point out is Howard Jonas, the IDT building in Newark. The IDT building in Newark, take a stab which well-known, it's not Trump, but you're close, which well-known real estate mogul owned the IDT
Gotta
building
be Jared, the son-in-law, Kushner.
It's Charles Kushner.
Right.
Charles Kushner, who's as close to Netanyahu as you can get.
Yeah.
And in fact, when you went, and my friend Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro, who I've talked about Zionism with and everything, he's an ultra-Orthodox Jew who's an anti-Zionist. When I mentioned this to him, he said, well, the IDT building, they had a quote from Theodore Herzl when you run right in the building. Herzl, of course, is the father of Zionism going the late 1800s. And so the IDT building, that is a Kushner property. And Jared Kushner brought in Ira Greenstein, who was the president of Genie Energy. He never resigned as part of the transition team picking State Department officials. I'll say that again. The president of Genie Energy was one of 3 people, along with Anthony Scaramucci, who were vetting State Department officials.
Wow.
Right? And so Jared Kushner's and Jared Kushner's the guy who brought him in. And then Greenstein had an office in the Eisenhower building. He's friendly with Bannon, friendly with Seb Gorka. So again, this is like not even close. I don't know what else to say. There's nothing I'm saying has any conjecture to it at all. It's all a matter of public record. And it is like the Epstein story in that the only thing that's shocking about it is why nobody in the media, it's complex, sort of, but it's not really complex. I could do 20 stories based on what I've said. Like that there would be, each story would be, because I used to, when I did for Breitbart, I'd do 500, 600 word stories, right? It's really easy to go, Jared Kushner brought in president of Genie Energy, who didn't resign to vet State Department officials. Boom, that's one story, right? You just do them individually. There's nothing tricky about this. And it's the most blatant corruption thing I've seen. So when I started to look into the Epstein story a little bit, when I heard, by the way, do you know one other thing about Bill Browder? Guess who Bill Browder's first mentor was? Guess how he got his start?
I don't know.
You're looking at him.
Maxwell.
Robert Maxwell. Bill Browder worked for Robert Maxwell. That was his first thing when he went to England.
Wow.
You follow me?
Yeah.
So nothing here is, when I heard, I didn't know, I really wasn't following the Epstein story.
Right.
I thought the Epstein story was like,
Salacious.
Okay, he's a salacious, it's just not the kind of thing I cover, right?
It was presented that he's some pervy rich dude who's going with prostitutes.
Right, exactly right. Which pervy rich dudes going with prostitutes is not that interesting to me, right? You see what I'm saying? I'm not knocking it, but I'm just saying. When I heard Maxwell's involvement, I was like, boom. And then when I saw Richardson's involvement and all these other people were directly connected to this whole Browder network, you follow me?
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I'm starting to see a big picture here. In other words, there's other aspects of this that involve Palantir, that involve Promise, that involve this company Carbine 911. That starts to take you down another path. But just the fact that Browder worked for Maxwell, that is no accident. There's no accident. Browder is part of this network of people who are connected to the UK and connected to Israel. And they're Jewish the way the mafia is Christian. Does that make sense? In other words,
well, they're probably Catholic, but I hear you. They're not that into it.
They're not really following the tenets.
Right.
Thou shalt not steal, for instance,
or kill,
and thou
or
shalt not kill. Right. And so you've got guys who, with the way I phrase it is, because again, you've known me a long time. I'm not anti-Semitic.
No.
And I found myself going, gee, I'm not anti-Semitic, but Israel's coming up a lot here. And that's where I found the work of Yaakov Shapiro, and I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. What's happening is these are guys who imagine if the Pope suddenly said, which is the equivalent of what Israel's done. If the Pope said, hey, everybody who's a Catholic can have dual citizenship. Like, you're a member of the Vatican
City.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. What would happen is criminals the average Catholic would go, okay, whatever, maybe I'll do that, maybe I won't.
Right.
But criminals would go, well, wait a second. We can have dual citizenship. This could come in handy. So if you look at all the oligarchs in Russia in the 90s, they were all quote unquote Jewish.
Huh.
But not really. By the way, the guy who got their passports was Robert Maxwell. It came through this Russian gangster. But Maxwell was directly involved in that. Because you got to remember, Robert Maxwell is Eastern European. His name's not really Maxwell. It's like Jan Hoek or something like that. And so what happened was this network of people a lot of these Russian oligarchs, after they fled Russia in the 90s when Putin came down and said enough, a lot of them went to Israel. And they used the dual citizenship thing. And by the way, Maxwell was key. Maxwell is the one who brought a lot of he helped the Jews get out of Russia and emigrate to Israel. That's one of the things he brokered. But again, a lot of them weren't really Jews. They were Jews in, the cultural sense or whatever. Yeah. But they weren't practicing the religion of Judaism like my friend Yaakov does, who, or like yet Netanyahu doesn't keep kosher, but Yaakov's got a funny joke. Yaakov lives in Brooklyn, right? And he's part of that ultra Orthodox, right? And he's got a good joke. He says Netanyahu went to see the Pope, and the Pope said, I forget what the line is. He said. The Pope said, do you want the kosher? And he said, no. And Yaakov's joke is, but it's true. He said, you could tell who the Pope was and who Netanyahu was. The Pope was the one wearing the yarmulke. and it's true. Yeah. Netanyahu is not an observant Jew at all. And this connection of Maxwell to Eastern Europe and Bulgaria, because he spoke the language,
yes,
he was able to move between Russia in the Soviet era, be a spy for Israel, be a spy for the UK. And by the way, when I say spy, I don't really mean in the James Bond sense. I found a great interview with the guy who's Gordon Thomas. Mm-hmm. And he talks about how what Maxwell did was he opened doors. That's what he did. Because he had a lot of money, he was able to open doors, right? And so, and he was like the king of Bulgaria at one point. That's what his nickname was.
Yeah.
Maxwell was, so he moved between Eastern Europe and everything else. It's no accident at all that Browder ended up working for him, then went to, after his death, then went to Safra, then after his death, a lot of people die around Bill Browder, then hooked up with HSBC. This is a British operation. It's an Israeli operation. It's a U.S. deep state operation. The U.S. deep state is no longer, it's not the NSA and the CIA, which it is, but it's not just them. The State Department is effectively today doing the kind of operations that the CIA was doing in the 60s.
Wow.
But they're now done by state. So, for instance, the overthrow of Ukraine, these coups that they're doing, they're involved right now in Hong Kong. They were deeply involved in Ukraine. Venezuela. These are State Department operations.
Libya.
They don't need the CIA to do them anymore. They still do, and the NSA still does stuff. By the way, the NSA connects to Promise and Palantir and all these other.
Let's talk about that for a second, because we know that Robert Maxwell was very involved in the theft of Promise software. Palantir is something that we've spoken about quite a bit. You and I have spoken about it. Quinn Michaels used to speak about it quite a lot. And it's, of course, Peter Thiel is the principal behind Palantir. Palantir is a pretty scary thing for people who don't know what it is. It's similar to these things like Thin Thread and Trailblazer and the Hammer and all this kind of stuff, but it's for law enforcement, and it basically allows them to look at everything. They can track municipal cameras, people's social media accounts, phone calls, text messages. It's this sort of all-seeing eye surveillance kind of software, isn't it?
It is, and let's talk about Promise for a quick second, because you may have talked about that before. Promise was a software. It was software that was designed for the legal system. So what these are is they managed to get themselves something that every government would want. And Robert Maxwell is the person who went around selling it. But they put a secret back door.
Right.
The Justice Department and the Israeli government put a back door in. And it allowed them to steal nuclear secrets from Los Alamos and Sandia Labs, for instance.
Wow.
Now, let's talk about Carbine 911. Are you familiar with them?
I've heard of it. This was something related to Butina, right? Or no?
Well, no, it's not. Let's look it up. They got a website, Carbine, which is CARBYNE911.com. And you got to remember, when we talk about Epstein's Israeli connections, it's not just Ghislaine Maxwell and the fact that Robert Maxwell was there. His number one connection is Ehud Barak.
Yeah.
Ehud Barak, former Prime Minister of Israel, received $2 million from the Wexner Foundation when Jeffrey Epstein was running it. Now, if you go to Carbine's About page, Carbine is marketed to, it's a new form of 9/11 software, 911 software, not 9/11. 911 software.
Service, yeah.
Emergency services, exactly the kind of thing people would want to buy. And who is the, so if you go to, find the board, the team, sorry about that, find the, again, this is a live website. You're seeing it for the first time, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's look up our team. Lo and behold, who's the chairman?
Looks like Ehud Barak.
That is Ehud Barak, is the chairman of the company. If you scroll down a little bit, you will see Nicole Junkermann. Nicole Junkermann is a German entrepreneur who was on the Jeffrey Epstein flight logs, including one private flight when she was like 27 years old, that she took with Epstein for a 3-day trip to France. And I don't think it was sexual, because right? I don't think that's what it was. And here she is. She's on the board. I think it was business, right? Now, Carbine has, and you're a tech guy. One of the things that they have a video about this. They say they can track people indoors within 3 feet.
How does a 9/11 emergency calling software track people? Is the idea is you call 911 and then they know where you are?
It's hooking up. They have a very slick video on the site about it. In fact, it's on YouTube. If you look up Nicole Junkermann's name, you'll find a number of videos, including one for Carbine 9/11. And what they talk about is it uses Wi-Fi of like vehicles and other stuff and lets you film. It's really kind of weird because people don't, like, let's say you see somebody in an accident, you can film them. And by the way, this is their YouTube site. They've started putting in stuff. Nicole Junkermann is on very few people's radar, but again, and by the way, don't forget how we got started on this part was Palantir.
Right.
Okay? We'll come back to them in a second. But, so this is what it is. You're driving along in your car, and suddenly you see somebody down in the road, so you start filming them. They've fallen and they can't get up. Right?
Yeah.
And it cuts response time. So they want to sell this to everybody. Now, do a search for Carbine funding. I can tell you, you're not going to see Jeffrey Epstein's name probably in the thing, but he is one of the funders. He put in like $3 million to Carbine, in addition to the other money. By the way, Ehud Barak, all over Epstein. He went to Epstein's mansion,
yeah.
blah, blah, blah.
Pictures of him going
right?
in there.
That's right. So go back for a second. Go back to Carbine funding, and you'll find that they did, I think, a $15 million round of funding.
Yeah.
There we go. See right there? Click on that and see who you find for the investment company behind Carbine. That's right up the top there. It just told you in the headline.
Founders Fund. Right. So that's Peter Thiel.
Founders Fund. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That is Peter Thiel and one of the founders of Google, Brian Singerman, and 2 other Silicon Valley guys. So here is Peter Thiel, guy behind Palantir, which was funded with money from the CIA, from the In-Q-Tel funding group. By the way, the Mossad has an ad. I don't know, have you seen the ad where the Mossad is openly trying to get high-tech companies to bring them projects? It's out there. You'll find it.
I've not seen that.
It's not hard to find. Just look at the Mossad high-tech and you'll find it.
Wow.
They're very, very clear. So what I'm saying is you've got Thiel right at the center of this. As an investor, not just behind Palantir, but also in this carbine company.
Lee, let me
And
ask
if
you
you
this.
start to,
Didn't the NYPD ditch Palantir for the same exact reason that you're describing Promise was an issue, that there was a back door and the NYPD felt it was not secure?
I believe that's correct, yes.
So that's
Yes.
interesting. It's the same thing. They're running the same
It's
play
just-
again.
Exactly right. And by the way, the Promise software, not just that Robert Maxwell, one of the people he was dealing with on that was Ehud Barak at the time. Ehud Barak was part of that whole thing. You got to remember, Barak is one of the most, I think he's the first or second most decorated member of the Israeli Defense Force.
Right.
He's a military legend in Israel, and was also a major Mossad advocate. And don't forget, Maxwell was buried with full honors in Jerusalem.
The Mossad
So there's
guys were there at his funeral thanking him for his outstanding help, right?
That's right, yes. I mean, again, none of this stuff, there's no conjecture here. You're looking at the website. That's Ehud Barak's thing. And anybody who, and by the way, where I'm getting attacked on Twitter, people go, you're anti-Semitic. And I'm like, I think it's more that I can read. I'm not, I don't, like I say, to me, these guys aren't, this is not observant Judaism to me. This is making money. And then they use that trope. You know, they use that. There are real anti-Semites.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't agree with that, and it's bad. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about clear connections, and this is why I think no one's covering the Epstein, the real guts of the story, because it so clearly connects. Think about what the foreign policy implications of this are. If a blackmail ring run by a foreign government, in this case
touches
Israel,
presidents and all this stuff.
Right. Yes, and people like Bill Richardson.
Well, but not only that, Lee, you've also just laid out for us, so here is a photo of Ghislaine Maxwell with Rupert Murdoch. And this is not just some accidental encounter. Rupert Murdoch and Robert Maxwell seem to be old friends. They're hanging out, smiling with each other throughout the years. And as I understand it, Robert Maxwell bailed out the New York Post in the 1990s. Maxwell owned the Daily News. Rupert Murdoch's News Corp owns the Post, owns Fox News. So perhaps the reason, or one of the reasons people aren't covering this, is that these guys have a stranglehold on the information flow. And when people like you or I try to talk about this, they've developed a lot of sophisticated ways to shut us down and make it look like, you know, there's just random people. We talked about social engineering quite a bit on Crowdsource the Truth. And as you pointed out, I've recently been doing a lot of reporting on that incident where Ghislaine Maxwell was spotted at the In-N-Out Burger. This story broke in the New York Post, and I've now spoken to the two women who wrote this story. I've spoken to Larry Salona, who is kind of a heavy hitter at the New York Post. It's been revealed that these photographs were manipulated. Maxwell is made to look like she's 30. Lee, you're a graphics expert, of course, and this is really sophisticated Photoshop work. You cannot see, as you've often said, the handprint on there. This is perfectly done,
right.
Her face. However, this image has cropped out some of the more sloppy photo retouching that's done, and there are other images that are even worse. So the totality of what's been presented to us by the New York Post with regard to Ghislaine Maxwell at In-N-Out Burger is highly suspect. I called the lawyer, Leah Safian, last night, and if people haven't seen that, it's still up on crowdsourcethetruth.com. Safian seemed to become very nervous when I asked her about the details of this photo shoot, and she hung up the phone. So it takes me back to our original question. We've got this sort of, you know, darling of the pro-Trump movement, Devin Nunes, who has been a big advocate of, you know, squashing the Russiagate thing, who now, last night, comes out and is appalled that Fusion GPS would smear Bill Browder. What are the implications of this, Lee? What is Nunes up to?
Well, let me just mention one other thing in that Murdoch, Ghislaine Maxwell photo, because I think it's important. I'm always suspect of what I call journalism by photos. Like if you see a photo of two people together, that may or may not mean something.
Right.
But this photo that you're talking about here was taken at an event put on by Rupert Murdoch's then wife, Wendy Dieng.
Mm-hmm.
Wendy Dieng. So in other words, that's not an accidental meeting.
Right.
Ghislaine Maxwell was invited to that event. And again, you can see that it's put on by Wendy Murdoch. Wendy Murdoch, let's tie this back into some of the stuff we've talked about. Do you know, can you name the couple that Wendy Murdoch kept together? Do you know this background?
No.
Okay. Type in Jared, Ivanka, Wendy Murdoch, and you will find that when Jared and Ivanka were on the verge of breaking up, because Ivanka didn't want to convert, Wendy Murdoch kept them together. They met on their private yacht, the Murdoch's private yacht, and she is the one, and again, this is not conjecture, this is a public story out there, and they're also concerned that Wendy Dieng is a Chinese agent. And you can see it right there. They briefed it, but she is the one who kept Jared and Ivanka together. And so my theory on some of this stuff...
She looks really young to be married to Rupert Murdoch.
Yes, she is. And it's just amazing what having all that money will do. It makes you apparently much more attractive to women, Jason.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yes. You do it through, I think, exercise. But, you know. But I do it through eating meat. But it's not really working for me. But Wendy Dieng, she is the one. And don't forget, Murdoch not only owns the Post, but he owns the Wall Street Journal. That's significant. And Fox News. Wendy Dieng is right at the center. And again, this is to me, a Kushner scandal. And Kushner is all throughout this thing as well, by the way. He's all throughout this. So you want to know why. People forget that Jared Kushner, one of his mentors was Rupert Murdoch when he bought the New York Sun newspaper.
Oh, that was short-lived. They brought it back maybe 15 years ago, the New York Sun.
That's right. And it was specifically Kushner who was involved there. So that's why this book I'm working on, I'll pitch the book to the Epstein Network. What I'm doing in that book is laying out these various tentacles, many of which connect. You follow me? Mm-hmm. So you can look at the Epstein thing and go, well, let's follow the Israeli connections, and you get not just Robert Maxwell and Ehud Barak, but other connections that, for instance, the Wexner Foundation that Jeffrey Epstein ran was an Israeli charity. That's what it was about. The Les Wexner, Michael Steinhardt connection, blah, blah, blah. You can look at the UK connections to Prince Andrew, to Robert Maxwell again, to blah, blah, blah. You can look at the Genie Energy connections. We can run down that. And so that's this book that I'm doing, is I'm trying to lay out the various networks. And what you'll see is a lot of these things interconnect. So let's take it back to Nunes. This is a group of powerful elite people, and it's kind of like a Jenga game. Mm-hmm. You follow me?
Yeah.
Because if you start to run down, by the way, you will find, if you look up Genie Energy, you will find no mainstream reporting about it whatsoever. Why not? Ira Greenstein was on Trump's transition team. The appearance of this, just the appearance of that. The Golan Heights now is Trump Heights. They named it that. By the way, who advocated for that? Alan Dershowitz. You'll find that very easily. Alan Dershowitz is one of the people who was actively advocating for the Trump Golan Heights deal and praising him. And he published it over at Gatestone Institute, which is Nina Rosenwald. Nina Rosenwald connects to John Bolton. He was at Gatestone, right, and connects to this whole other group of people. Bolton, Bannon. People forget that Steve Bannon met with Jeffrey Epstein twice once before 2016 and once in 2018.
Now, you've
Why
worked
is
with
Steve
Steve
Bannon going to
Bannon
meet?
at Breitbart.
What's that?
You've worked with Steve Bannon at Breitbart. Where are you at with Steve Bannon these days?
Steve Bannon's a bad guy. And the New York Times had a great story last night on how Israel and Bolton are pushing, and how Bolton was brought in by Bannon. And I've been saying this for 2 years. When I used to host the Breitbart News radio show, first off, Andrew Breitbart believed in real journalism, period. That's what he believed in. And that's how we were able to get stories right. Bannon, who took over the night Andrew died before his death was announced, I knew about it. I sort of saw it happen in real time. That article, The Secret History of Strike Iran, it mentions a couple things that I've talked about, which is I've talked for a couple years about how it was clear to me Bolton was brought into this administration by Bannon. This, I've been saying it for 2 years because I saw it up close and personal when I was hosting the Sirius XM show. But the other thing I mentioned here is the MEK, which is a whole nother deal that nobody on the right, no Trump supporters. Do you know about the MEK?
I don't think I do.
Okay, and you're a smart guy who does this for a living. And you'll see it gets mentioned down here briefly that Bolton was with the MEK.
What is it?
The MEK is John Bolton and Rudy Giuliani are connected to him. Just type in MEK flag. Now, this is what I'm saying. The MEK, if you, again, think like a Trump supporter for a second. Like, think like a Republican.
Supporter.
No, I know, but I'm saying put whoever is out there. You see the flag right there?
Doesn't
you see the
look
one
good.
on the left there?
Yeah.
No, that's the flag. That is the flag. The MEK stands for the People's Mujahideen.
Oh boy.
This is a Marxist jihadist, and you can see by their logo, it looks like a Marxist jihadist cult. They're literally a cult. They have a big compound in Albania. Now, type in MEK John Bolton, because you'll think to yourself, well, wait a second. If there's a Marxist jihadist cult, I don't think a lot of Trump supporters would be. Look, go to the image search. Go to image source.
Image.
Sorry. But so that's the article talking about this is who Giuliani and whatever you think of Iran, this doesn't seem better to me.
Yeah.
Now scroll down a little bit, and you'll see. Okay, right there. Stop right there. See that picture? Click on that.
This one?
Yep. Mm-hmm. So this, just if there's any doubt in anybody's mind that John Bolton might not know what's up with the MEK, look at the flag.
Yeah, there it is.
There
so
it is.
What's he doing?
He's the main advocate for the MEK. They have a big event every year where they talk about free Iran. Steve Bannon brought a MEK advocate, Adele Nazarian, who I know personally, and I like Adele, but she's an advocate for this group. So there's John Bolton with the MEK flag. Type in Rudy Giuliani MEK, and you'll find him posing at that same podium. That's out in front of the White House, but they also do these slick events. Nobody who's a Trump supporter, again, you do this, and you can see what I'm saying. If people think like a Trump supporter for a second, you'll go, yeah, I'm not sure what's up with this. Scroll down. So they do these events, Free Iran. So they look very nice there. But if you scroll down, you'll find a picture of Giuliani. That's the cult leader.
The woman?
When I say it's a cult, I'm not joking. It's a cult. The guy who ran it died, and now his wife ran it. And if you keep going, you'll find it. It's the same event. See, you'll see lots of these ones. But keep scrolling, and you'll just find the outdoor picture of Giuliani at that same event.
How can these guys be so contradictory in their actions?
Because they get paid and they control the media. So because Bannon controlled Breitbart and brought in an advocate for the MEK, right? Maybe Giuliani just MEK and then Park or so. Well, see, it's okay. So we got to be getting close. But you'll find it. You'll find Giuliani was at the same event that Bolton was speaking at, And they've gotten smarter about like, hey, maybe we don't want the rifled and sickle flag.
Yeah.
But again, look up the MEK. They are, I don't say this lightly, they're a Marxist, jihadist cult. They have a big cult compound in Albania, and you'll find a very interesting video about that on YouTube, about the MEK. No, I have never met a Trump supporter who has a clue about the MEK, yet they're supported by John Bolton's national security advisor. They're clearly the people. If you go to videos for MEK, you'll find stuff about. There it is. Is that? Wait, I think I see it. I think we just went by the picture.
There it is. You can see him outside there. It's covered by
some
some
text. Yeah, and scroll down a little, and there's one without. I saw it.
This?
I thought I saw it.
Yeah, there he is with Bolton.
Yeah, Bolton. And again, you'll see the...
and there he is.
Yeah,
right
there it is. There it is.
It's the Young
with
Turks.
The flag. Yeah. Yeah.
So they're connected to the Justice Democrats, AOC, all that. What the hell is Giuliani doing? Does Trump know about this, Lee? What is going on?
I don't know. I can't tell you what Trump knows. What I know is Giuliani and John Bolton are connected by the MEK. By the way, the MEK was designated as a terrorist group because they were connected with Saddam Hussein. That's who they were connected with.
Wow.
This is not even... I mean, again, nothing I'm telling you here. It is one of the biggest buried stories for people on the right. There's no conjecture about this group. And I don't know what Trump knows, but I know for sure that John Bolton and Giuliani are as big. You can find a video of Giuliani speaking at this group's event. If you go to YouTube, go to YouTube, you look up MEK, and you'll find videos where Giuliani's speaking to them going, "You're the future of Iran. This is who they want to be in charge of."
Wow.
Yeah, they were...
It's amazing that this doesn't get more play. This is an article from Politico saying that Giuliani took money from a group that killed Americans. Does Trump care? We really need to be asking this question. You know, I'm still supporting Donald Trump. I'm still planning on voting for him in 2020. But we're right now in the moment where the question is, Mr. Trump, what the hell is going on? We need to start indicting people. We need to start getting rid of people like Bolton, maybe even Giuliani. This is surprising information to me, Lee.
Well, it gets if I tell you about the Ukraine stuff, it gets worse. Rudy Giuliani.
I think we might need to come back for that because it's a whole other long story. But people are really responding well to this information that you've been dropping on us here tonight, Lee. And although I'm sorry that Kevin couldn't join us, I think it was time well spent, and you had a lot of time to go into some details here, which was really great. I think we're going to have to do this again very soon. And
sure, anytime, man.
Yeah, we're a little bit out of time here, but I want to remind people that they can listen to Lee on Sputnik Radio every morning. Give people the details, if you would, Lee.
Sure. The best way I think is to go follow me on at Stranahan on Twitter, and we broadcast the show in a Periscope video that is kind of well produced. I don't know. Have you seen the video of the past couple weeks, Jason?
I watch it often. Yeah, it's good.
And we're using, Jason will understand this, we're using the NewTek NDI cameras.
Ooh, nice.
Yes. So we have these nice, Jason and I go way back in video production. And my son Shane is now doing the stuff. And we got nice titles and everything. That's a great way to watch the show. The other thing people can do is if they sign up at The Populist US for the free mailing list, we're doing a mailer now where I send people the highlights of the show. I link to the whole show, but I do it right after the show. Here's what I do, Jason. Mm-hmm. I record a video for people on the mailing list, and I say, hey, here's what we did in the show today. I really recommend you listen to these things. So if people don't have 3 hours to listen to the show, and who does, I can tell them, hey, we had Jason Goodman on. You're really going to want to hear who we talked about the Epstein, because we have had you on talking about the Epstein story. Because I got to say, Jason, you're one of about 6 reporters, me, Whitney Webb, Amazing Polly, Patrick Henningsen. There's like 6 or 7 people covering this Epstein stuff, right?
Yep.
And And again, I think it's for the same reason that you see Nunes. The money. This is where the money is. And let me end with this. The other thing people can do is if they send $51 to me at paypal.me/Lee Stranahan, they'll become a patron of my book, The Epstein Network. And I will be dropping a bunch of research material. I'm opening up my reporter's notebook, all the links that I'm using to research the book. I've been trying to get it written in it, and it's not been effective, Jason. I'm going to start getting up at 4 in the morning and writing for an hour and a half before I work, because that's the only way to get it work. But if people can go, if people can support what we're doing, because again, you know the gig, man. You for people who don't know, Jason and I have known each other 25 years.
Yeah.
And I used to be not just a visual effects artist and a teacher, but a graphic artist in the show Access Hollywood. Mm-hmm. And you know that gig paid a lot better than this journalism gig. Yeah. Right?
Yes.
No, it's
no doubt.
It's sick.
Yeah.
When Jason and I worked in the TV and film industry, separately and sometimes together, we made more money and very few people hated us.
Right.
But now you do journalism, right?
Yeah.
And when I was doing Paris Hilton lower thirds at Access Hollywood for 5 years, it was I loved the job, and I was making $120 a year base salary plus blah, 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 blah.
Plus it was like 15 years ago.
That's right, 15 years ago. And it was a great gig and blah, blah, blah. But then I accidentally got into journalism, and it turns out I'm good at it. So if people are asking for money, which I am, it's because the expenses, I subscribe to about 6 newspapers. I have equipment, blah, blah, blah. And this is what I do. I don't have, some people go, why don't you get a second job? Apparently, I have one because, again, everything I'm talking to you about here was off my head, right? That's off the top of my head. So what people don't realize is, and you do, Jason, that sometimes people attack me and go, stop begging. I'm not begging, I'm busking. Begging is when you walk down the street and someone says, hey, can I get $1?
Right.
But if I see a guy playing guitar and he's phenomenally good, which they are sometimes. This is a guy by DC. He's phenomenally good. He plays Maggot Brain by Funkadelic. It's great. And I'll give that guy $1 whenever I hear him play Maggot Brain. Just go over and go, okay, thank you. That's a great song. But I know that dude, I'm seeing him play, he spent 1,000 hours in his bedroom before he came out. Does that make sense? So Absolutely. The way I can talk as fluidly as I do on this subject is I spend all my free time researching. That's what I do. And so, that's what we do. So for $51, you'll become a patron. It makes a big, big difference in the work that I'm doing. I want to get this book out in the next month or two. When I started the book, Jeffrey Epstein's death had not been reported.
Right.
Which is the way I will phrase it.
Right.
And suddenly I'm down this freaking rabbit hole with Palantir and with Promise.
And the first interview that you and I did, you were the first person I called when I decided to start Crowdsource the Truth. I was just making these videos about the petrodollar sitting in front of a webcam, and I was like, I don't really know that much about this stuff. I'll start interviewing people because I can ask questions about stuff that I don't know. And you and I did this interview, and you had mentioned Eric Weinstein, who is the head of, or the vice president of Teal Capital, right?
Teal Capital, yeah.
And also a social media influencer. We'll talk about him in a future show. Someone in the chat, Lee, was asking if you're on Gab, and what I've found is on Gab.com, @Stranahan is a fan account that is not yet connected with you, Lee. The account username is reserved until Lee decides to open a Gab account.
Yeah, I'm intentionally bad at a lot of social media. Twitter's my main thing, and frankly, I spend too much time there. And so every time someone's like, well, are you on, I'm on Instagram with, food pictures and stuff. But it's just hard for me. And Gab, it's just like Twitter's where the action is, unfortunately.
Right.
You know,
and
there's
also,
a lot of problems with Twitter.
To address one other thing that you were mentioning about people saying stop begging or busking or whatever it is, the way I look at it, Lee, is that, you know, you've just spent more than an hour explaining to us how the criminals that are able to lobby Congress to create laws in their favor, they're able to finance blackmail operations to influence presidents, members of the royal family, influencers of governments around the world. These are the same guys that own the newspapers, the television channels, the news shows that are purportedly bringing you the news, but what they are actually doing is crafting a narrative that allows them to shove their agenda down your throat without you even knowing it. One of the things that I'm trying to do with Crowdsource the Truth is reconfigure the way people relate to news and the way it's funded. Crowdsource the Truth is a viewer-sponsored resource, so there's no mega millionaire coming in here dropping, you know, huge bucks to influence the stories that are told. This channel is paid for by the viewers, and that is part of the reason why we're doing the intelligence assessment today on YouTube and Facebook and Periscope and DLive, and of course for our sponsors at Patreon and Subscribestar. But it's really important that people watching today share this video, let everybody know about patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and patreon.com/Kevin_Shipp. It's also critically important that people go to Lee's websites and sponsor Lee. Go to citizenjournalism.com, sign up for the program. You're going to learn a lot. Even if you don't want to become a journalist, you're going to learn a lot about how to become a discriminating consumer of information. Lee, what are the other sites that you want people to go to?
Well, the big one, I would say, my Twitter feed is the big one that I send people to, because you get everything there.
Right.
That's where I would send people to. We're about to relaunch some stuff at Citizen. When I started Citizen Journalism School, I've changed my opinion. I used to think that I would teach people, because you know, Jason, I've taught for a long time. And when I used to teach animation, I was trying to teach people, here's how to get into the animation industry, right? You want to, and I help people do that, right? And you've seen, I helped a lot of people do that. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do that for journalism. I'll help you get a job at Breitbart or wherever you want to, Huffington Post, places I've written at, wherever you want to work. Now I realize, Jason, that the media is hopelessly, completely corrupt. So the only possibility of fixing it is to basically do what you're doing and what I'm trying to do, which is a completely different kind of media. Because even guys like Mike Cernovich and Jack Posobiec, if you go to thepopulist.us, I've got a big story about this guy, Jeff Geisia. Jeff Geisia is the guy behind Cernovich and Posobiec. He's the multimillionaire behind Deplorable. He's the guy, according to him. Read the article. It's all completely there. By the way, he worked with Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel, who was at Deplorable, worked directly with them. Did you know that?
I did not. I was there.
And okay. And
I don't think I knew who Peter Thiel was at that time.
And did you know who Jeff Geisia was?
No.
Did you see his speech where he mentioned, by the way, for people who might be interested in this, his do you know what Jeff Geisia's great-grandfather did?
No.
He was the president of Bohemian Grove.
Oh, yeah, you told me that. Wow.
And so for anybody who wants to understand how the power elite works, if you look at the Bilderberg website, Eric Schmidt is on the steering committee along with Peter Thiel. There you go. And by the way, the guy who's the head of Palantir is also on the steering committee of Bilderberg. The guy who's the CEO of Palantir.
Wow.
Right? So what I'm saying is, when you look at guys like Cernovich, right, which a lot of people have heard of, much bigger following than you and I. You look at him, he looks like he's like standing against, he doesn't even have like, I like at least try to put some hue lights up here to make it look decent.
It does.
He doesn't even do that. Well, he doesn't even do that because he doesn't want you to know that he's backed by a multimillionaire, Jeff Geisia, who's connected to Peter Thiel, and that's why they push the stories that they push on you. So even guys like Jack Posobiec, and I've talked about this, and Cernovich, people are under the, because what these guys say is, oh, well, he's jealous and he's envy. I'm not jealous. I'm not at all jealous. These guys are paid liars. I know how to do it. I could be a paid liar. You shill for Israel and the UK deep state. You shill for the defense industry. I know how to do that. If I needed to, I know how to do that. I just choose not to, because I'm more interested in telling people the truth about things than shilling for anybody. So I'm not as wealthy as I could be, but at the end of the day, I sleep well.
Yeah.
You know.
Now, Lee, we're well over time here, so I think we want to wrap it up. But the last thing, and I'm not, believe me, this has been tremendous. I think everybody is really getting a lot out of this. I'll bring it back one more time because this is really interesting to me. I was shocked last night when Devin Nunes made this statement about Fusion GPS smearing Bill Browder. What do we think Devin Nunes meant by that? What do we think Devin Nunes is trying to achieve with this lawsuit? What do we think about the smear?
He's trying to achieve what they wanted to achieve, which is Fusion GPS has been made by Fox as the bad guy. Mm-hmm. In fact, Jonathan Weiner's the bad guy. In fact, Jonathan Weiner's the guy who brought Christopher Steele into this. And you can look it up and find that very easily. But they don't want you to know it. They want you to think that Fusion GPS is it. Because then you can go, okay, so the bad guy's Fusion GPS, and they were working for the DNC, so that's the bad guy. They don't want you to see that, in fact, it's Jonathan Weiner who connects to Khodorkovsky, who connects to Richardson, who connects to Epstein, who connects to this whole network of people. And I showed you how they all link together, and you're just going like, and again, you know the news very, very well, Jason. The stuff I talked about with Wendy Dieng and Kushner, was news. Any number of things I told you here were news to you, who does news for a living. So they don't. If they can keep you focused, if they can make you think that your Jeffrey Epstein story was a rich pervert,
right?
Then that's fine, because they that's where they want you to think. If they can make you think it's a rich pervert, but if they can make you think that Glenn Simpson was the bad guy here. Now, Glenn Simpson clearly was paying Steele and everything else, and we could get into that whole thing at some point.
But it seems like from what you're saying that the idea here is focus all attention on Fusion GPS and Glenn Simpson, indict this one guy, and then the problem goes away. And they don't really care about him, so boom, stick him in jail.
And the Fox News audience, right, exactly
Eats
right.
that up.
Which is why, by the way, if you read Glenn Simpson's testimony, one of the things what he did is he found factual information on Bill Browder. Glenn Simpson is an establishment guy, but when he was hired to do the job of investigating Browder, everything he found was accurate about him. There's nothing he found that's not true. Because it's not hard to figure out the truth about who Bill Browder is. It's not. You just look at his deposition. By the way, that deposition, Glenn Simpson tried to serve Browder, and Browder ran away from it at Aspen, where he's got a $12 million house in Aspen.
Wow.
So, no, Browder lives like a billionaire because he's the mouthpiece for this establishment elite thing. If they can get you to think, which is what Dan Bongino does over at Fox, which is what Hannity does over at Fox, if they can get you to grasp that he's the bad guy, it's just Fusion GPS, and he was funded by Hillary Clinton, so you don't think upstream at all. You don't go, no, wait a minute.
Right.
Who's this Russian billionaire who connects to the Carlyle Group and the Bushes and the Clintons, right? And wait a second, then and then that's connected to Larry Summers, and then Larry Summers. Once you start to go upstream, it becomes, you get to Rupert Murdoch in about 2 moves. You follow me? Don't forget, Rupert Murdoch's on the board of Genie Energy, on the advisory board. So Bill Browder is like 1 degree of separation from Murdoch. Okay?
Unbelievable. Well, now it makes a lot of sense how we're getting all these stories in the New York Post and all this stuff on Fox. Lee, it's been a fascinating conversation, and I know that everybody watching wants to see you back, so we'll arrange to do that real soon. Kevin is disappointed that he couldn't be here. I know he wanted to speak to you. He wanted to hear about all this. Kevin will be back next week. Thank you so much for standing in, Lee, and for bringing out all this great information. And with that, unless there's anything else you'd like to say.
Well, I'll throw up, people go to the Twitter, I'll throw up the PayPal link, and if anyone wants to sponsor the Epstein Network book, it would really, really, really make a big difference. I'm trying to get to the point where I can get this book done and not have to fundraise, and so it really makes a big difference. And you'll get a lot of amazing material, and it will scare you.
And it's important for people who've been watching this show and find this information valuable to go over there, and you can't just turn on a video on YouTube and say, you know, those guys are doing fine, because we're not going to be able to sustain, we're not going to be able to maintain without your support. Let me spell your name right here. There we go. And so I hope that people will go over to Twitter, pick up Lee's info, follow him on Twitter, support the book, sponsor Lee. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Really appreciate it. I've got yet one more special show coming up tonight at 10 p.m. John Cullen has uncovered new evidence that the Las Vegas, what is it, Metro Journal, the main paper there in Las Vegas that's owned by Sheldon Adelson, cut out selectively sections from Corey Langdon's video, the original video from the cab driver in Vegas who picked up audio of shooting from under the canopy there at Mandalay Bay. So tune in at 10 p.m. right here to see what John Cullen is going to reveal. Thank you so much to Lee Stranahan. Thanks to everybody who's been watching. Don't forget to go to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.